we're just going to be a little stream of consciousness-ish in this process. I'm going to do a painting demo for you in just a moment, sharing my interpretation of today's World Watercolor Month prompt, obstacle. But I also want to talk to you about your obstacles, the things that you might be struggling with in your art practice right now, and maybe share some words of encouragement from one self-taught artist to another. So stick around for that. I've been painting along with the World Watercolor Month prompts periodically through July. My schedule does seem to prohibit me from painting prompts every day, and I'm also not really an artist who thrives on being told what I should paint on a given day. That's why I really try to be as loose and relaxed with prompts as possible. You know, when I first started painting in watercolor, I was just about 19 years old, and that's nearly 30 years ago now. And that's hard to believe. You know, when you're 18, you certainly aren't thinking how your art practice is going to be, 30 years down the road, 20 years down the road. That just seems like a lifetime away. Instead, you're focused on just trying to master the skills so that you can paint something good right now. So wherever you're at in your art practice, I think it's really helpful to remember that you will grow, time will pass, keep showing up to paint, and a lot of the things you struggle with in the beginning are going to vanish and kind of just be dealt with by the sheer persistence of you being too stubborn to quit painting. And I'm going to choose some colors from Rockwell today. These are my little 3-color sets from Rockwell, and each one has some really beautiful hues to it. You can see the color samples here. And most of these are what I would call semi-triads. In other words, you're getting some kind of blue-ish color. You're getting some kind of magenta or red or pink, and you're getting some kind of yellow, something that's near all of those hues. And near because they play well together. You get a lot of versatility in mixing. And with those 3 colors, you can get quite a lot of beautiful paintings accomplished. This particular palette is the only one that isn't a triad. You can see here I've got some darks and a beautiful red-violet, pinky red-violet. So each, and this sea blue black is a favorite of mine as well. So each of these sets has a self-evolving color in it that will separate into a beautiful mixture of hues as it dries. I think I'm just going to lean into those 6 today. And most of the time when I'm painting, I'm choosing just a handful of colors. So I'm working with these 2 little sets. And I'll put a link in the description below the video, as always, so you can see what I'm using and be linked up to those products. And whenever I start painting, thinking about the obstacles I felt when I first started painting, let's choose a brush that makes me happy. And usually that's one of my Lebenson paintbrushes. Let's go with the larger one. Early brush strokes always do better with a big, large brush to fill the page with paint. And I'm not going to be working from a reference photo today. The word obstacle is enough to get my creative juices flowing, get me thinking about my art practice and how I paint and how I develop paintings. And the word obstacle really gets me going because I really struggled as a painter to feel like I had the cards stacked against me from the outset. I started painting on the strength of 8 2-hour watercolor lessons in my local art gallery here in northern British Columbia. And I live in a region where I don't have a lot of resources. There aren't watercolor classes on even an annual basis in this region. I didn't know that at the time. I started painting and I wanted to paint and I took the first class that was available to me. This is the lapis brown from Rockwell. We're just going to let it flow on the page right now. And then from there I was on my own. I took those 8 classes And then I went home to paint as an independent learner, I guess, you know, until the next opportunity for classes arose. And that wasn't for quite a few years down the road, actually. And so on my sofa, night after night, I would watch TV, a painting board on my lap, and I would try to figure out watercolor and how to maybe get it to do what I wanted it to do. This is the gold ochre. I'm pairing with the lapis brown right now. And I felt like my obstacles outweighed any chance that I could maybe one day call myself a real artist, that I could maybe think about having an art business or making art for a living. That would just seem like an impossibility. Nobody was doing that where I lived, and the opportunities for artists were very, very few. It's just that way. And if you live in an area that's not highly populated, you know what it's like. You might be the only person doing what you're doing in your area. And so that felt like an obstacle, that I didn't have resources at my disposal. Another obstacle was my budget. I couldn't afford to spend a lot of money on art supplies. And I think it's kind of ironic that as artists kind of grow and build a following, we start to have some influence, especially in this day and age of social media. And I get offered free supplies to try fairly frequently. And I can pick and choose what I want to use. That's the lapis brown again. It's just so pretty. I could spend a whole painting just working with lapis brown. And I'm just going to watch what the paint does as it flows in this wet area here. So I think, so my budget was an obstacle, and time has always been an obstacle. Nobody that I know, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who says I have all the time to paint that I need. Pretty much we're all in the same boat. Oh man, I could just watch this paint move forever. I'm just going to soften this area so that they're not too jarring against each other. And I'm just kind of lingering over these colors. I want to pay attention to how pretty they are. It's really tempting to just not even go any further with this, start a new piece of paper and see what I can paint while this is drying. And when watercolor is beautiful like this, I think that's a really good strategy. So working alone, feeling like my lack of resources was definitely going to hold me back for some reason. And I think, you know, anybody who loves what they do, we keep painting anyhow, even when we feel like, you know, it's not going to take us anywhere. It's not going anywhere. We can't really do it for any reason other than that we just want to. And I had a hard time with that as a young person because I really wanted to be successful. I really felt like I needed somebody else to tell me that I could be good, that I could feel good about what I was making. Let's make some interesting lines on top of these shapes. And as the paint kind of soaks into the paper, I can work with a wet brush. You're going to see a lot of flow. You can see that happen here. But if I blot my brush a bit, which is what I'm doing right now, and then work with a little bit of a drier brush, I can get some finer lines, while also blending them in with some softness. Maybe we'll bring in some of this magenta. It's called actually rose red. It's a kind of magenta. And that's a disruptor. Let's see what that does. And I think that if you're in a place where you feel like you have obstacles that are preventing you from accomplishing what you want to accomplish as an artist, one thing that you can recognize is that consistent effort will reap something. You know, showing up consistently, and I think for me that meant pursuing art because I loved it, but also trying different things, trying to grow in different ways. Just going to keep adding water to soften. And I had nobody to tell me that I was doing it right. which I really had wished that I had. I wished I had someone who could tell me I was on the right track, I would see success at some point, my work and my skill was growing. I didn't have that. But I also didn't have anybody telling me the opposite, telling me I was doing it wrong. And because of that, maybe there became an individuality in my work. And when you work in kind of a little vacuum where you don't have those voices of input, and especially for me in the 90s when I was learning to paint, I didn't have social media even. I couldn't post my work online and ask for and wait for feedback. More lapis brown again. I'm kind of looking for a pattern of shapes right now. I'll put a dark here and see a kind of, there's kind of a big V shape right now, a big triangle. We're going to develop inside of that. So I didn't have anyone to tell me I was doing it wrong. I had hoped for someone who would tell me I was doing it right. But in the absence of any of that feedback, I got to create on my own. And I think I did things wrong for a long time. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. I think I felt like I was spinning my wheels for a long time. That might be a better way to describe it. Let's bring in the lights. Turquoise. I love this light turquoise. It's going to add a little splash of kind of light disruption to the painting as well. And so I think, for a long time I kind of worked trying to please an imaginary person, trying to think about what someone would say if they saw my art and please an audience. And then when I would kind of crawl out from my home studio sofa, to share my work, it seemed like people were pretty apathetic about it. And you might be feeling that too, that you share your work and it gets crickets. There's not much of a response. And so what happened for me was, because nobody seemed that interested in what I was painting, I realized I was free from trying to impress anyone. And that took some time. It didn't happen overnight. But I just remember feeling kind of one day that maybe there was an advantage in not getting the feedback that I was hoping for. Maybe it was the advantage of being able to do what I wanted and stop worrying about whether or not it would sell or whether or not it would win an award. And all of this was still, me hoping to do art as a business. So in that case, my obstacle became something that freed me, because the obstacle of not getting the feedback or not having the mentors I hoped for was that I had to be my own mentor and determine for myself what success looked like in the absence of approval. And in the absence of having a venue to sell my work, in the absence of impressing people, then if none of those things could happen for me, how could I feel satisfied, joyful, successful about my art? Just letting those beautiful hues mix and mingle. The lapis brown, I just can't say enough about it. As it separates, it creates a blue. Maybe you can see a hint of cobalt blue in here, and it's really gorgeous. And so what I started to, I'm going to draw, I'm going to carve out some of the shapes that I'm seeing inside of my painting. This is an abstract today. And so where my pencil goes doesn't matter nearly as much as how I feel about it in the end. We're just going to be a little stream of consciousness-ish in this process. And another thing that happens, so in that case, my obstacle, not having those resources of people to speak into my art practice, I learned how to listen to and advocate for myself. And that has been an ongoing practice for me. And it's something that I encourage every artist to think about and pursue. You need to be your own biggest advocate for your work, your own coach, and you need to believe in your work unashamedly, even if no one else seems to get it. And you're going to grow and evolve. That doesn't mean that you just continue to press on into something that maybe isn't, if you are trying to be a professional artist, if you are seeking sales or awards or growth, representation, or all of the things, we do seek to evolve. But we do that while also pursuing, who am I? How do I show up in my work? How do I do that better? How do I communicate maybe more clearly what I care about, rather than trying to figure out what other people care about and communicate that in your work? It's really about learning how to articulate your own artistic voice in just a stronger, more confident, bolder way. And there's a beautiful sense of motion right up here that I really love. So, and that's an exciting thing to think about. There was a sense in which then I felt like there was that apathy of others freed me. Another area where I struggled with obstacles was when I came to the place of realizing that in my composition, I was lacking something. And I remember years ago putting a painting into the local art gallery, into a show. I really like that little pop of light there. Negative painting. Putting a painting into a show, and I just happened to be lucky enough to have it hang beside it. I had this lovely little watercolor. It was like 8 by 10 inches. So it was not a big painting. But somehow the gallery chose to place it beside a 6-foot painting by another artist. And his painting, mine was delicate watercolor, many layers, really delicate transitions of color. And his painting was black and red. Very strong, very dynamic. And my painting was almost literally invisible on the wall beside this 6-foot impactful black and red, just exclamation point of a painting. It was very striking painting, absolutely gorgeous painting, and he really deserved every person who stopped to gasp at that painting, and completely didn't see mine. And at that exact show, realizing that my painting, although it was small, and that was one reason it didn't have that impact, my art wasn't landing hard wasn't causing anybody to stop in their tracks and stare. Even in exhibitions of other watercolors in similar sizes. And what I realized at that time was that my command of my values, my compositional contrasts, were weak. They weren't strong. We weren't seeing patterns of light and dark. And I felt like such a failure as I realized that what I didn't know about value was making my work harder for people to see and appreciate. And so at that stage, I decided I was going to start learning about value and value contrasts and strengthening my values in my work. And I think it's been probably 10 years since that episode and that realization. A few years ago, I got an email from Tracy Lebenson asking me to give his handmade paintbrushes a try. And I was very intrigued by the brushes he sent me. Let's take a look at Lebenson paintbrushes, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I think they're so special. Tracy Lebenson is a really unusual person. He has a 50-step process for creating his handmade paintbrushes, and as you can see here by the little lineup I have, each one is unique. And from these pistol grip kind of brushes, which are made specifically for people who might be having trouble handling the slimmer handle of a traditional paintbrush. If you have any kind of degenerative condition in your joints, or if there's just something that makes it hard for you to hold a paintbrush for a long period of time, Tracy can actually custom make a nice fat handle for you to grip. I find that when I change my grip on my paintbrush, I get a different shaped mark, and so that's kind of a fascinating thing to observe and to use in your painting practice. These brushes range from synthetic brushes to, this is synthetic as well, to natural fibers and natural and synthetic combinations. And Tracy's very passionate about being ethical in how he sources his materials. He often shops estate sales to rescue old fur coats to use those fibers in paintbrushes. And I love that idea of bringing something like an old fur coat into this handmade artisan brush making industry. And the same goes for his handles. The bamboo handles that he makes are often harvested by Tracy himself. Tracy's described his brushes as Ollivander's magic wands for painters, and I'm here for that as well. But just as important as how a brush is made is how a paintbrush works. For myself, I love painting large, and so I immediately gravitate toward the larger brushes in Tracy's repertoire. These three are, they kind of all fall in the same range. I think this one's just a little bit larger in diameter than the other two, and it's also got this thicker grip at the bottom, which is designed to be more comfortable to hold. Although I actually usually hold my brushes a little higher up the handle for a freer stroke, and so I'm not usually holding it down here. One thing I noticed when I started painting with these brushes is a traditional brush has the metal ferrule, which can actually cut the bristles as you're painting. When you're working that brush back and forth, that metal ferrule is kind of wearing against the outer bristles, and eventually those bristles will be basically chopped off by the metal. We also know that with the metal ferrule, water can get trapped inside the ferrule. The wood under the ferrule can swell, and and sometimes my paintbrush handles, the paint chips off, they get rusty. This one you can see the water kind of has accumulated under here and stained the brush. And so there's sometimes these ferrules get looser as the wood kind of shrinks and swells over time. With a Lebenson brush, we're not seeing that because there's no metal used in how this brush is assembled. The bristles go inside the handle, and they are very firmly attached there with a very specific process. It's not just haphazard gluing to make this work. What I've noticed is, if you look at these two brushes, I've been using this one the longest. This brush has been in my studio for at least 4 years, and I've actually used it to paint some really large paintings. I think I did 3 or 4 3-foot by 4-foot paintings exclusively with this paintbrush. It has been a workhorse for me. I do find with all paintbrushes, the bristles don't last forever. They get a little brittle, and you might see a few little hairs snapping off from time to time. But even as this brush has changed, my biggest complaint with paintbrushes is that over time, the pointy fine point that you see when you first buy the brush kind of vanishes, and the brush becomes really rounded, and then you're no longer able to get a fine line. Your point of your brush gets rounded off, and your line becomes fatter. With these Lebenson brushes, even after 4 years, I'm still getting that beautiful point, and then the comb-like marks that I love. And I want to show you how those are with my painting practice, because I think mark making is a really big part of any artist's painting practice. One of my favorite things that these brushes does is it creates this organic line. This is with dry brush on dry paper, and you can see just really beautiful organic strokes. When the brush is wetter, I'm getting a fat line with really moist paint, a little bit fatter, but it also can be very, very fine. I like being able to vary the width of my lines, and that's why I love these brushes, especially because they've got this fat belly. I can get a skinny line with a dagger brush here in my studio, but to carry the volume of paint, to be able to create both fat, very beautifully saturated lines, and then to come and create a finer and organic mark. To me, that's just so much fun. And I've found my lines becoming more playful, more lively as I've worked with my Lebenson brush. I can really vary my strokes, and that makes my paintings more interesting. I'm always working to create an effortless look in my paintings, and when I use a Lebenson brush, I get fine lines, beautiful organic broad strokes, and that feeling of really natural expression. So often when I'm trying to be careful and precise with my mark making, what I end up getting looks more like a row of soldiers, stiff and regimented. But with these brushes in my hand, I'm continually playing with my lines, drawing with the tip of the brush, filling in passages of color, and creating fascinating edges by moving that paint with the tip or the side of the brush. And it's just been a really fun exploration. These beautiful brushes are handmade when you order, and so I would encourage you to take a look at the Lebenson Paintbrushes vast catalog, see what looks like a fit for you. I'll describe and link the ones that I like the most in the description below the video, and if you use the code Angela when you place your order, you'll get a special discount code just from me to you. And what happens is when you realize you have a weakness, it's very easy to feel ashamed a little bit, to feel like you always need to qualify your work. Well, I know it's not my values aren't very good, so I recognize that. I'm trying to work on it, and just apologize for your own art. And this is just a Neocolor water-soluble crayon we're bringing into the painting now. I like drawing with line. But what I've realized over time is you're always adding to your body of knowledge. And so my command of values, I don't know how, I don't get to say, it's exponentially better, but it's something I've been conscious of ever since, and learning how to teach myself how to see it, but also to teach myself how to see it in my way. I'm never probably going to be painting a 6-foot black and red stop in your tracks and gasp kind of painting. That's not who I am. And I'm okay with that. But I do want to have a strong enough command of value so that people are drawn to my work from across the room. And perhaps when they stop and come in closer, they get the gift, the visual gift of the beautiful nuances of fluid and evolving color. In this painting, for example, we're seeing all kinds of colors that you don't get to put a name on. As the color flows, we get there's a peach and a blue happening over here. It's transitioning, shading to gold over here. We've got kind of a denim blue over here, and then a rust. The rose red is creating a lovely pink glow in some places, and we have that strong magenta pop over here. And all of those things are a reward for the person who will take the time to look. And I actually really like that about watercolor. But I also realize that as soon as you realize you have an obstacle, as soon as you realize that you're weak in an area, you get the gift of growth. And because you don't get to unlearn what you don't know, or unknow that you don't know something. And so suddenly it becomes an area that you can't unsee. And so when I realized that my compositional skills were weak, that meant I also had an opportunity to just really develop in that area. It meant there was an area that I could see even rapid growth, perhaps. And I could concentrate my attention on there and recognize that there would be some payoff to that in the future. And kind of like that, I just drew a flower. And so over the years, whenever an artist says to me, and I do a lot of teaching, I teach online on my website at heartledartist.com, and I teach in person, and you can check out my travel schedule at angelafair.com. Whenever someone says to me in a class, this is an area where I struggle, and they articulate something they're really struggling with, I get to tell them that's good news. And I love the fact that it gets to be good news that you see where you are struggling, because you have now seen an area where you can devote yourself to our rapid growth. You can look for ways to change that. And it doesn't mean changing who you are. I'm really very joyful over the fact that I still get to be undisciplined. There are artists who create really planned out paintings that have really mapped out all their contrasts. And that's never going to be how I bring contrast into my paintings. Rather, I continue to be an intuitive, present kind of painter. I value trying to see the painting as it evolves in front of me, which is what I'm doing here today. I had no idea where this would go when I started. Although I frequently work in kind of that triangular shape. But everything else is just kind of, I'm along for the ride. I notice something I like over here. I try to do it over here, somewhere else. I bring in a color over here. I disrupt it by bringing in something else, and I repeat it somewhere else. And as a painter who lets the painting evolve in front of me, I've also learned how to look for and bring contrasts into that. And I'm planning and working around some of the light glowing areas in this painting and some of the heavier darker areas. And what I guess I'm saying is, when you realize that there is an obstacle, it can also be the greatest gift your art can give you. So I felt like I needed some darks over here, so we're going to bring those in. Because your art gets to fill in that space. And it fills it in a couple of ways. It is a place where you can learn and apply yourself, but it's also a place where your uniqueness can shine forth. And as I've realized that being isolated can feel, well, isolating. Living in an area where watercolor isn't, I'm one of the few who actually pursue it. It has felt isolating. It has felt difficult to find those mentors, but it has also given me the gift of individuality. Not having someone to, poke their oar in and advise means I have had the freedom to learn how to do art, how to paint in my way, and how to find my own voice. And in terms of developing my values, even when I realized that that was a weak area, bringing in contrasts, figuring out how to create those beautiful contrasts in my paintings, I think it came at a time when I was already exploring my own loose intuitive style. And so I knew that I didn't want to sacrifice my process, the process of being very present and allowing the painting to evolve in front of me. I didn't want to sacrifice that in order to have more control over my values. And so I've really had to learn how to paint intuitively and be attentive to contrast. Let's just draw a little line there. The midst of this kind of intuitive, playful, see where things go kind of practice, and hold those two things kind of together and loosely. And so as you think about your painting practice, and I think I'm going to stop here. I really like this little dance of maybe sunflowers with white petals, imaginative sunflowers. And we didn't even touch some of the other beautiful colors in this palette. We stuck with the lapis brown, the gold ochre, the light turquoise, and the rose red. But I've really loved working with colors that kind of give me that freedom to bring in with freedom, to let color flow, to play with shape and contrast, and not worry about whether or not I'm doing it right. The one thing that I've really loved about this process, maybe my contrasts will never be as dynamic. I don't know. As an artist who invests a different level of planning and intention to their paintings, but I'm having a lot of fun for a girl who gets to create a painting in, 40 minutes or less, 30 minutes or less, and have my creative therapy for the day. Crayons, fluid color, spatter and all. And my obstacle, my limitations that I thought were holding me back, have ended up becoming the things that I love the most. And my obstacles, the things that I thought were holding me back, have ended up becoming the strengths that have empowered my authenticity and my individual personal identity showing up in my work. And I want to encourage you with that. Whatever it is that you're struggling with today that you feel like, if only I had such and such a resource, if only I was better at, if only I didn't, fill in the blanks. If you hear the word obstacle and you're thinking of something particular about your art or your practice or your limitations, right now, I want you just to stop for a moment and think about the possibility that perhaps your obstacle is the way. It is the way to helping you find your voice. It's the way to helping you find a workaround that works for you. It's the way that you have to develop a way of compensating maybe for that struggle. And it's going to create something authentic in your work that you didn't see before. And it's the way to growth. If there's a very particular area that you can grow in or should grow in, and you just haven't, you've been busy feeling bad about it instead, now's the time to say, you know what, I'm not great at that thing, but maybe if I can take half an hour a week and work in that direction, I can see some big changes in the future. And I think sometimes rather than feeling overwhelmed about a limitation, recognize that even taking a little bit of knowledge in is going to accumulate. It's cumulative. One day you're going to look back and go, well, 30 years ago I really struggled with that. And here I am now seeing it as one of the favorite pieces of my work, or something that is empowering others, or, fill in the blanks. It somehow has changed me, and I've embraced that thing. And it's become a beautiful part of my art practice. I believe in that. I've seen it in my own work, and I trust in that for you as well. And thanks for watching. All through World Watercolor Month, my hope has been not just to share painting demonstrations, looks at my process and my techniques, but to also share encouragement to help you where you're at in your art practice. I think the mindset side of art is probably the hardest part. We can grow in skill by painting every day, and yet somehow we get discouraged, we procrastinate, we just fail to show up for our art practice. Something we know we love, and yet it's just so hard to do. And my passion, my mission is to encourage artists to own your artistic practice, to really learn how to open yourself up to loving it, to pouring your heart freely into it, and to trusting that what you invest in your practice will return to you. I do that in a few ways, on my website, angelafair.com, in my online courses, and through my weekly email newsletter. That is the best place to start. I encourage you to sign up, and every single week you will receive an email from me with the goal of leaving you feeling just a little bit better about where you're at in your art journey. It's so valuable. You don't need to waste time feeling crappy about the art you're making. No matter what level of painting or creating you're at, there are things to love from day one. And as you freely give yourself into creating an art practice that's individual to you, that nurtures your creative spirit, it just reaps such a beautiful benefit. It comes back to you tenfold. And I just want to encourage you with that. Click the link below in the description below the video to sign up, or visit angelafair.com to find that sign up link. As always through World Watercolor Month, if you're posting your work on social media, include the hashtag World Watercolor Month. And if you hashtag me, Angela Fair, I'd love to see what you're making as well. Thank you. Bye for now.